Hi, Kevin.
Thanks for having me.
It's so nice to see you. Thank you for joining us to wrap up Wednesday at RSA. I'm Zoe Hillenmeyer. I'm CMO at Protect AI. I also moonlight running some of our strategic partnerships, including with Microsoft. And we've had the pleasure of working together for a little while. Love you to introduce yourself to those in the room, the very large room.
So, Kevin Magee, I am the Global Director of Cybersecurity Startups for Microsoft for Startups and previous Chief Security Officer at Microsoft Canada.
Amazing. All right, Kevin, one of the first things you and I talked about when we met was just this landscape and how wild the landscape of cybersecurity in general is, but of course, the wild, wild west of AI cybersecurity. And one of the things I've heard a lot on the floor as people come up to our booth this week is like, AI is on every sign. Now, I was talking to Ian, our CEO, a little while ago, and when he came to this show 3 years ago, he said he didn't see AI on a single sign. And 2 years ago when we were here, we were the only AI cybersecurity vendors in the room. Now it's literally everywhere. So what are you hearing as you're meeting with customers and practitioners? Are they overwhelmed? Are they excited? Do they know what's going on? Like, what's happening?
Well, first of all, I wish I was the AI sign salesperson. I think that would have been the best investment this past year. I think that you have to say agentic AI, or you're kicked out of RSA this year. Right? That's the case. What I'm really thinking about and what I'm talking to customers about is they want to unlock the power of AI. Boards are talking about this. Executives are talking to this. How do we use it to cut costs, to be more efficient, to do more with less, to augment our staff, to build competitive advantages? But with that comes additional risk. And risks that we've never even encountered before or never even conceived of that are really challenging our traditional ideas of what cybersecurity is.
Yeah.
I grew up in the packet days. You just use Wireshark to check the packet, that was it. I could never have conceived of some of the threats that I'm seeing demonstrated live on the floor at RSA.
Yeah, we've been having a lot of fun here running model combat, where we've got models going head to head on their security postures. And it is genuinely entertaining in some ways. I mean, entertaining to look at all the weird ways you can hack into this stuff. I mean, Pig Latin is incredibly effective. I mean, much more effective than you might think. And then it's also like a little bit alarming. Like it's a little bit of both. As an example, it's entertaining. As a reality, it's a little bit alarming. So what are the companies that you're talking to thinking about in terms of how to prioritize where to start? If they want to be adopting AI, they want to move, they don't want to do it with risk, what do they do?
I think the biggest challenges are the business lines have their own ideas, and they're coming forward with ideas, and often they're taking the initiative on their own without involving IT or
about
security.
Cybersecurity or about the AI app?
About AI, about digital transformation and whatnot. So they're getting going, thinking they're in an experimental mode, not really recognizing the risks they're introducing to their overall organization. So it's a good thing. It's great leadership to show initiative in these areas, but how do we balance that with security? And it's often they just don't understand the risk associated with putting confidential data in an AI, allowing AI access to certain things, and they're finding out the hard way that when someone runs a query or asks a question and payroll data comes up or whatnot, it was never meant to be part of that. So I think we need to move fast, but we need to move not so fast that we're creating additional risks. So having that discussion early, what do those guardrails look like? How are we going to safely look at implementing these things are really great. And if we look at analogies outside of IT, we don't rush medical treatments or drug testing to market. We have established protocols, but that's been developed over years and years and years. Literally, while we've been talking, there's probably been advances in AI. How do we apply those type of models to what just the exponential change in this industry? I'm really not sure yet.
Yeah, I think that's so true. Like, actually, the model combat that I talked about earlier came out of a desire from us. New model dropping every week. How do we help people understand Grok, what that means from a security perspective? You know, you need to start coming up with templates for this stuff. Obviously, we also believe in productizing some of it too, but let's look at how a model compares to another model, not just the model in isolation, right? So I think that we gotta be scrappy, right? We gotta try different things to figure out how to stick up with that pace. One of the things you and I have talked about also is bringing together that practitioner level with that executive level to get the buy-in for building AI in a secure way. What are like the top tricks you think work?
I think one of the challenges we have is technical folks don't know how to communicate what they need to the board or to the C levels. So one of those things that they really have a trouble asking for is money. So we need money, to invest in technologies that will secure, because it's almost like if I'm asking for more, or I'm asking for something new, then I'm not doing my job well. So I think we really need to think of a partnership. The board, the C levels, they want to embrace this digital technology, but they want to do it safely. And we need to feel confident and able to have that conversation about how we do it safely, how we make it happen, and what we need in terms of tools, education, headcount to make it happen. And we need to be crystal clear about what that looks like, but also have them understand that we may not know the answers. We may get some of these things wrong. We're looking at securing a technology that never existed before. We're going to make mistakes. So how do we have that conversation about patience, about understanding, and really just empathy for us folks that are really trying to make it work for the business?
Yeah, I think it's like AI development is not and has never been cheap, right? You want to build an AI application that has never been a cheap journey. And so it seems to me like a natural extension that if we're going to do that, we're going to do it for an enterprise, and it's going to touch important decisions and important data, that it has to be done securely. And so maybe that's like the in for that technical person. If you care about your craft and you're already building AI or you're helping enable the development of AI, I promise you it's not cheap. The compute is not cheap. So you should be able to go in with confidence and have the conversation about the security, right? You're making the investment already. Let's make that investment in a comprehensive way.
The first question I like to ask businesses or leadership is, what risk tolerance are you willing to accept? So it's not just spending the money, it's not building. Let's have a real conversation about the risk tolerance you're willing to accept with these technologies. And when you get into that conversation, it starts to draw out specifics of where we're going from a lens where we're thinking about securing innovation and digital transformation first. And I think that's where we really have to have that first conversation. We cannot, as practitioners, let them abdicate those decisions to us and then hold us accountable for the wrong decisions afterwards. It needs to come from the business. It needs to come from leadership. And that risk discussion, risk versus reward, is their job. It is their role. Yeah. It's not ours. Ours is to implement that. We can mitigate that risk. We can accept that risk, but that's not our decision to make. So I think pausing to have that conversation, and a lot of it is philosophy. A lot of it is tolerance of the business and culture, but it needs to really happen first.
Yeah, I mean, it's challenging though, because if you've never seen these risks before, what you were saying in the beginning, we've never seen some of this stuff. We've never had to build software that will behave in ways we can't predict, or create new languages, or generate new rules, or, I heard about one the other day, that customer service bot that just came up with phone numbers to send to people for people to call for customer service. They were just random people's phone numbers. That's never been a thing. So if you want to draw that conversation out, what's your risk tolerance? How do you do that if the business doesn't know what the art of the risk possibility looks like?
And I think it's really, what is the culture of the company? Do we have safeguards in place? Are we at least having that discussion? If you think back to the dawn of my career, if you had told me I'd be walking around with a computer with the world's collective knowledge in my pocket, it sounded very sci-fi. And now literally every person here has at least one of those devices in their pocket. So I think we're having to deal with these exponential increases of just constraints, but also possibilities in a new way we never had to before. And I try and quantify it. Again, when I was a young guy starting out, I had two keys. I had my car key and I had my house key, and that was it. Now I'm having to remember thousands of passwords potentially. I'm having to think through when I receive a message. Not only is this a phishing email, is this a deep fake? But now I'm not even sure that that's a person that I'm communicating with as well. As we move into agentic, when agentic starts to act on our behalf, we've been creating movies about this for ages, about autonomous agents and whatnot, what they could do, but we never really thought about what those permissions are, what they look like, what we want them to do. So I think as we get more engaged in AI and we think about all the technology can do, where does the human fit in? Where are the human elements of this? And these are the discussions I think really need to have. They're leadership discussions, they're empathy discussions, they're HR discussions. It's going to be a fascinating time to be alive for the next few years.
It's interesting. We did a team offsite a little while ago, and we were trying to think about, our brand, what it means to us. One of the things that kind of came out of that was unexpectedly human. We've always had like a deep principle of not using like the ones and zeros and all this like technology gobbledygook, because at the end of the day, the people building the technology are people, and we have ownership over what we build and what we create. And like we all need to take some of that ownership. So I think that's interesting, like where the human fits into it. At the end of the day, like the humans for now are building a lot of technology. I don't know in 5 years how much technology humans are building. We'll see.
I took a picture of a car driving itself.
Oh yeah.
For my son.
We're in San Francisco, so.
I don't know if I ever dreamed that we would get to that point where that would happen. And I'm fascinated by that today, to the point I took a picture. When I come back next year, will I even notice if a car goes by that's driving itself? That'll be a good litmus test.
Yeah, somebody mentioned to me yesterday seeing one of the like little robot dogs in a park, and some kid came up and gave it a command and it did some like weird stuff. They're like, could a robot dog be hacked? Yeah. I mean, why not?
Well, I'm even fine. I'm experimenting with the tools. I'm of a vintage where this is difficult to learn, and I don't have the background. So just what it can do for me. And I remember building out, a report that I loved, and I liked the formatting, but I didn't know how to recreate that. So one of the young folks on our team said, well, just ask the AI to create the prompt to recreate it. Never occurred to me.
Yeah.
So I think it'd be interesting when we bring in diverse points of view, younger points of view, other cultures and whatnot, how they will perceive and how they will see these challenges. And, my kids never grew up in a world where there wasn't always internet on. So the new generations are going to grow up in a world where there has never not been AI. How will they perceive and how will they think about the technologies differently?
Yeah, I've always kind of thought, in the early days, nobody knew what an algorithm was unless you were like working on it. And then I've always thought, as what's been really interesting to me is now my mother-in-law, who's a pediatrician, knows what an algorithm is. And she's like, oh, the algorithm knows what what I like or whatever. And I always thought the more transparency, the better on these things, the more visibility, because the data science community, the cybersecurity community, we run a community called Hunter with over 17,000 security researchers that look for model file vulnerabilities every day. We also have MLSecOps, which is an amazing practitioner community of over 8,000 security practitioners learning. Like the community is paying attention. So the more transparency that there is in terms of what models are being used, what weights and factors are going into those models, and how they're getting used and then put into applications, the easier it's going to be to feel confident about the safety of those.
And it all comes down to trust. And if we think about all aspects of security about trust, but physical trust was easy to establish when we put walls around cities and locks on doors. When we moved into the virtual space, what is trust? How do we establish trust? We're going to have to rethink that. Now, when I started using AI models myself, it was primarily for research. I didn't like it writing things on my behalf, but I always asked for the source. And I always wanted to go to the source and look at, where it got the information from. At what point will I just accept that it's correct?
I don't know. I'm old school. I keep looking at the source.
Well, this is where things like humanities degrees, where we've deprioritized some of these aspects, I think are going to come back in vogue or style or whatnot. I have a history degree. what a history degree taught me was to look at primary sources, to think about bias, to interpret things different. I think it's a skill set that served me well throughout my career, but is even more important now. So we pushed everyone so far to STEM that we've lost some of that capability of critical thinking, of questioning, the validity of facts, and really going to source to understand truth and understand trust. And I think this is a chance to recapture that. And what I see a lot of people using some of these technologies for are not just efficiencies or whatnot, but to teach themselves new things, to explore new markets, to create new products and services that have never been done before. And at the root, I'm a hacker in the good sense of the word, the original sense of the word, but I'm also an entrepreneur. So I can't think of a better time to have an unlimited canvas to create as we do now. But with that comes, how do we do it securely?
Yeah, I love that. Well, before we wrap up, I'd love to just get like some Kevin hot takes. What do you think is the most overhyped thing on the RSA floor right now?
Well, like we said, if you don't say agentic AI, I think it's come up in every conversation or whatnot. It is the new buzzword. So what does that mean, though? When I ask, I get a different answer. So I think that we're going to have to calibrate what we mean by that. And maybe it's different categories of an answer, and that's kind of fine. I think that's the conversation we'll be having over the next year. I'm really interested to see next year when I come back, if I ask that same question, will we have a definitive answer? Or will it have broken into maybe shards of an answer as well, too?
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think having been on the AI hype cycle for basically my entire career, I can say, like, whatever the latest, buzziest thing that's happening in AI, there's something scientifically, foundationally true about that. It's also probably not in production, right? So, like, the amazing, phenomenal thing is last year, the buzziest thing was Gen AI. 2 years ago, it would have been LLMs before it was Gen AI, right? Like, you can trace these things through. And this year it's agentic. And, like, all of them are useful. They're all productive. They all do things that are helpful. But today, in production, in the biggest companies in the world, 90% of that is none of it. It's more traditional ML from 2020.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, if we look at some of the bigger trends in the past, it was the World Wide Web. And then we shortened that to WWW. It never made sense to me. Web 2.0 was the big thing for a while. Then it was social media. And it's funny how we originally go through this hype cycle where we anticipate where it's going, and then it takes a turn that we never conceived it before. I think, in the early days when the World Wide Web, it was going to be open source. We were all going to look at the code and everything was going to be safer. Well, it didn't work out quite like that. Social media was going to allow us to have frank conversations and connect with folks, and there would be universal truth because everyone could, expose anything that it didn't exactly work out that way. So the unintended consequences of good things will always maybe be a challenge for us, but keeping those in balance, I think we eventually get it right as technologists and as professionals. But we need to be in that discussion with the business very early. And I think 10, 20 years ago when these technologies evolved, we were in the basement. We were assembling PCs. We're rising up where, I'm starting to see CISOs actually reporting to CEOs, dotted line to audit committee chairs. We're starting to get those seats at the table earlier, and I think that's absolutely necessary.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Kevin, and your overall partnership and just friendship. We're really grateful to work with you over the last year and excited for the year ahead.
Awesome. It's been a lot of fun, and I can't wait to see what you have to offer next year.